So let us start with lesson number 6. No ASP.NET interview will be complete without a question on security. And if you are a 1 year of experience or 2 years of experience, and specifically if you're a senior person, right, answering security question is a must, or else it sends a wrong impression to the interviewer that what has the candidate done in ASP.NET, right? And so specifically the questions are around JWT token, principal, claims, roles, refresh tokens, OpenID Connect, OAuth, identity server, and so on, right? So here it is, 1 hour of dedicated session, lesson number 6, which has approximately 25 topics, which is focused on JWT token, principal, claims, roles, OpenID, OAuth, access token versus refresh token, authorized attribute, revocation of refresh tokens, OAuth, OpenID Connect, identity for server, how to do a single sign-on, scopes, what is the best practice, and so on. So 25 questions, 1 hour. Let us get started. Explain token-based authentication. Token-based authentication is a two-step process. So in a token-based authentication, what happens first is, the client sends in the user ID and password to the server, and the server responds back with a token. So that is the first step. So server responds back with a token, and then in the later interactions, user ID and password is not sent again and again. Only what is sent is the token. So in the later interactions, the client sends only the token, the server responds back, the server checks the token and responds back with the response. So it's a two-step process. In the first step, the user ID and password is sent, token is received, and the second steps later, only the token is sent. So this is termed as token-based authentication, or token-based authentication and authorization. So let me show you a simple demonstration of token-based authentication, because with demonstration what happens is, when you go before the interviewer, you are more confident while speaking, right? So you can see that this is the server out here, localhost 8000 products, right? And if you want to go and get the products out here, or if you want to get anything from this server is protected by token-based authentication. So for example, when I send a request out here, a GET request, it shows me a 401 token not provided. So you can see I'm using Postman out here, and it is saying me that the token is not provided, right? So the first step, what is the first step? The first step is, I will go to the login controller out here, right? To the auth controller, to the login controller. I will send him the username and password, right? So you can see at this moment, there is an email and a password. So when I send him the email and a password, I get this token, right? Then what I can do in the further request is I can take this token. So I can take this token out here. I can go out here and I can go to the authorization, and I just have to paste this token out here, right? So if I go out here and if I say paste this token, and now when I send the request, it shows me products, shows me the list, right? So that means that in the further interactions now, I don't need the user ID and password, right? And if something is wrong in the token, for example, let us say I remove this E out here like this, and if I send a request, it will again say not there, right? So a token-based authentication is a two-step process. In the first step, what happens is you get access to the token, and then after that you can use that token, send it to the server, and then server allows you to access the resources. Now the next question which can come to your mind is, why is it termed as JWT token, right? Why not just token? So the J in that JWT in that stands for JSON Web-Based Token. Full form of JSON is JavaScript Object Notation, right? So what is JavaScript Object Notation? It is nothing but it is a format, wherein you talk in terms of name and a value. So you can see here, this is a name, access token, and the value is the token, right? So in JSON, what happens? You start with a curly bracket, you end with a curly bracket, and then you have a name and a value pair, name and value. That's why it is termed as JWT token. And JWT is a good format, because it is a very lightweight format. For example, if you try to use XML out here, it will become very verbose. Think about it like, greater than sign, less than sign, access token, and then you put the token and slash access token again. So, the size of that that data just increases, right, unnecessarily. So JSON is more lightweight. That's why it is a preferred way of sending tokens out there, right? So the JWT stands for JSON Web-Based Token. JavaScript object notation is nothing but it is a format, a data format where we represent the data in name and a value pair and in curly brackets and square brackets. There are 3 sections in a JWT token, or I'll say rather JWT token is broken down into 3 parts. So you can see here, this is how a JWT token looks like, right? So this is the first section, then a dot, a second section, then a dot, and a third section, right? So the first section has the algorithm. So you can see at the right hand side, this red color here indicates the first section, which is a header. The second section is the payload, and the third section is the signature, right? So in the header, what we have is the algorithm, right? The algorithm by which this complete token would be created. Okay, so you can use various algorithms like RSA and HMAC and so on, right? So you can go and you can choose your algorithm, right? Whatever you want, right? So that goes in the header. The second section, this one here, is nothing but it is the payload. It is where the user information is, right? So this can have like a username like this. So username, you can see when I type here the JWT token is changing. It can have other things like that is he an admin or not, right? So is he admin? You can say true, false, whatever, right? Does he have access to, let's say, reports or not, right? So this is the section where where you have more of the user information, who is the user, what rights he has, and so on, right? And then using both of these sections, so using the header and the payload, a signature is created. So using the header and the payload, and definitely you also need a secret key, right? By using a secret key, a signature is created, right? So what happens is, this signature is what is checked, right? So when the JWT token goes back to the server, right, then the server says, okay, I have the secret key. Let me take the header, let me take the payload, and let me verify the signature by the secret key. If that matches, that means that this is the same token which I sent to you and you are the same user who has come back. If this token is tampered or changed, then the signature won't match. And if the signature does not match, this token gets invalidated, right? So a JWT token has 3 things inside it. First one, header, which has the algorithm by which this token will be created. Second one, payload, which has the identity information, like the username and other details, what access he can have. Now please note, in the payload, don't put a password. It is not safe. Okay, so you should never send a password. So because once in the first request the username and password is sent, then this token is created, right? So this creation of the token itself is a sign that the user is authenticated. So don't try to put a password inside this. That would be a very bad practice, right? The third thing is it will use both of this header and payload and create a signature by using a secret key, right? So header, payload, and signature. And signature is created by using the header and the payload. Now before we proceed, right, I think one vocabulary I should clarify right itself. Specifically people who are coming from vernacular medium or people whose English is a second language. And the vocabulary is identity. Identity means, so whenever you hear this word identity, it means the identification of a person or identification of a thing. For example, any person on this earth would be identified probably by his citizenship number, must be, or probably by his email address, or probably by some other thing, which is very unique, right? So whenever you hear this word identity, it means that data which identifies that user uniquely, right? Okay, so with that, now let us move ahead and talk about what exactly is a claim. A claim is nothing but it tells what rights the user has. For example, you can see this is the payload data out here. So in this we are saying, okay, the identity of the user is that user is Shiv, okay, but he claims that he is an admin. He claims that he can see the reports and so on. So claims in JWT token is nothing but, they talk about what the user can access, what the user has authority to do, right? A connected question which comes around this claims is, which can be asked around claims is, what is the difference between authentication and authorization? So authentication means identifying that user. For example, we now, for example, over here, this user is Shiv. So this is authentication. The first thing is we need to verify that the user exists in the system or not, right? So authentication means first checking that the user is existing in the system. Authorization means what rights does he have, right? What roles does he have? What kind of access can be given to him, right? So authorization more talks about the roles of the user. So remember that this 2-3 things the interviewer can ask you, or he can expect that you know about it: claims, authentication, and authorization. One of the questions which the interviewer can toss before you is, what is the difference between roles and claims? Now roles actually try to define a user type, right? So for example, you can have a role which is an admin user, right? So roles are more, they classify users with permissions, right? So you can think about role is more of classification of user types, right? It is classification of user types, and to these user types, permissions are allocated, right, or assigned. So for example, you can have an admin user, you can have a super user, you can have a user which has only read-only access, and so on. So basically it is user types and permissions, right? This is what roles is all about. Claims, can have permissions, right? It can have claims can have permissions, but at the same time it talks more about the subject. So it says that, okay, yes, he can be an admin, definitely, that is one of the part of the permissions, right? But he can claim that, or that user can claim that he is from India, or he can claim that his age is greater than 50, right? So claims talk more about the subject. So they do talk about the rights and roles and all that, but they can also talk more about the subject. So we can also say that it is possible that many of the claims cannot be roles. So roles are very specific. Roles are more related to security. It classifies a user, while claims are more related to security plus many other things, right? The second important differentiation between both of them is that these roles are assigned to a user type, right? So it is not assigned to a specific user, but claims, they have a context attached to it. So it is very specific to a user, right? So for example, you can have a user ABC, right? And this user ABC over here, right? Let's say in the user type, it is admin, or probably it is admin, right? But when this ABC user is actually running in your system, or when he's logged in your system, he can have, he can be an admin, definitely, that is one of the things. Plus, he can have something else. He will say that, okay, that I am a gold user, and I have bought lot of product from this website. Okay, now this is a claim, right? So he is a regular buyer. Okay, now this regular buyer is very specific to ABC. It has nothing to do with the user type. Okay, so claims are very specific to a user, and they are mostly on runtime. They are context based, right? While user roles are user type based, right? Claims, can have roles, plus it has extra things about the subject which can be useful to show something to the user, to make his UX more better and so on, right? So some of the things, are not really related to permissions as such, right? While when you talk about roles out here, they are users, who have user types, not even users, user types, to which permissions are allocated, right? So when you are speaking with the interviewer, try to put these differences when you speak about roles and claims. Again, one more question, which can come not really from the JWT token perspective, but more from the .NET security objects perspective, right? And these two things are very important. So what is the difference between an identity object, right, and a principal object? Okay. Now an identity object actually represents a user. So when you go and you create an identity object, it represents a user, like you can say Shiv, right? And this user can have roles, this user can have claims, right? So I can say, okay, identity dot add a claim, I can add a role, and so on. So it has claims collection, it has roles collection, and so on, right? While a principal, it runs it is assigned to a context. I'm so sorry, it is assigned to a context. So principal object is nothing but it is an encapsulation over identity and claims. So in other words, if you look at the principal object, you can say generic principal, and you actually assign an identity, and you can also assign a role. I just putting it as null, right? So you can see it has it is a combination of identity and roles. Okay, so a principal object is having an identity, right? So it has identity. It also has roles and claims attached with that identity, right? So you can go and check is in role, if this user who is there is he role or not, is in role or not, and so on. So principal is more of a big, it encapsulates identity, roles, and claims, right? And the most important thing about principal is that it helps you to assign a security context. For example, now this is the current thread. I can go and say, okay, in this current thread, go and assign this principal. And what is this principal? This principal says that this is Shiv, it has certain roles, it has certain claims, right? So summarizing, an identity represents a user, right? An identity represents the roles of the user, an identity represents the claims of the user, while principal actually encapsulates all of these things, and you can take a principal and assign it to a running context, to a code context, to an execution context, to a thread context. It is definitely not a good idea to put critical information in the payload. So this third section is the payload. It is not good idea to put critical information over here, because what you see with your eyes out here, this is not encryption. This payload is not encrypted, it is encoded. Encoded and encryptions are two different things. Encoding means you are actually transforming data from one format to another format. For example, if you're transforming data from binary to hexadecimal, then you can say that this is hexadecimal encoded, or this is binary encoded. So encoding means you are just transforming data from one format to another format, while encryption means you are using a secret key, you are using some logic like RSA or HMAC and so on, right? So those two things are different. So for example, now if you see this, I can go and I can copy this. I can just go online out here, right? So I can just go online out here, and I can just go and decode this information. So you can see here I've just copy pasted the payload out here, and I can just say decode. Remember, it is just base 64 encoded, right? So if I decode it, I can very easily see my payload. So in case if you put a critical information out here, it would be very easy, for an attacker to, once he gets a hold of your JWT, he can very easily see this information, and that can be very, very dangerous, right? So in payload or in the header, you shouldn't be putting any kind of critical information. Now let us start with the most important question. How did you implement, or how do you implement JWT token security in MVC core application, right? Now either the interviewer can ask you this one question and he is expecting an overall answer, or what he can do is he can ask you specific sections, like saying that okay, how is the token created, or how is the token checked, or what is the use of authorized attribute, right? So he can either ask you small pieces of the JWT token whole process, or he would like to hear the overall process of how you implemented JWT token, right? So let us go ahead and let us try to understand this 4 questions in one go, right? So first thing, how do you create a token in MVC core? The first thing is, what you need to do is you need to go ahead and install a NuGet package. So first thing is, you need to make sure that you have microsoft.asp.NET core.authentication.jwt bearer. This is that package which will help you to create the token. Once you have added the package, so now in order to generate the token, you need to follow the 3 steps. Why 3 steps? Because if you remember, the token consists of 3 parts, right? So first one is the header, the second one is your payload, and the third one is where your signature is, right? So when you're explaining the interviewer that how did you achieve to create JWT token using MVC, must be you should start mapping with the JWT token structure. So you can see the first thing is, you can see over here we have selected the algorithm, right? Second, you can see we have created a claims object, right? A claims collection, and we have said okay, what is the subject, what is the email, and then if you want you can also add things like is admin is true and so on, right? And after that we take both of these sections. So you can see here we are having a secret key, plus we are having an algorithm, plus we are adding the claims, and we are generating the token. So definitely in the interview it is very difficult to say the code, right? Like symmetric security key, that is, and I think that interviewer does not expect that, but at least you can tell him that okay, the first thing is I went ahead and I added the package, so must be that you can talk about. So you can say that the first thing is you went ahead and you added this package out here, ASP.NET Core Authentication JWT bearer, and then in the code you selected an algorithm. Try to just remember the algorithm name. HMAC SHA-256 is a good one, right? So you can just say that okay, my algorithm I selected was HMAC, and then we created a claims collection, and then we use the claims collection, we use the algorithm, and we use this security key, and we generated the token. Now please note that at this moment, to explain, I have put the security key over here. This is not a good practice to hard code like this in the program. Also, it is not a good practice to put it into your app setting files or something. So please note at this moment, this security key I'm just showing as an example, but this security key should be stored into some kind of an hardware lock or something, right? But at this moment for explanation, I have just put it hard coded out here. So just to summarize, how did you generate JWT token? Selected the algorithm, created a claims collection, and then used the security key plus the algorithm and created the JWT token, right? And yes, definitely one of the other thing is that this, you can see this generate JWT token will only be done, it will only be done when the username and password is good, right? So what will happen is, from the end user, you will get the username and password. Now definitely at this moment, again it is hard coded. This is where you will actually go and do a check in the DB. So this, you will take the username and password, you will check in the DB, and then you will generate the token and send it as a response, right? And in case if everything is bad, right, if the user ID and password is not existing, then you would not generate an internal server error. You would actually say 401 not authorized, right? So don't send an internal server error. You have to say that 401 unauthorized. So please note, this is again can be one of the interview question, that what kind of status code you will send to the client. Not internal server error, not 404 not found, but 401 unauthorized, right? So you will check the database, right? Check if the username is existing, then you will go and you will generate the token, and if the user is not existing in the DB, you will send a 401 unauthorized. So let us go ahead and run this application and let us test it. Now please note, all this source code is given in the same lab itself. So in the same lab you should be able to see this solution, MVC JWT interview questions, right? So this solution is out there. So in the security controller, in the post method, I'm passing a user object, wherein I'm checking the username and password. So let us test it. So I'm going to use Postman for testing. So let me go ahead here. So this is HTTP 44328, right? And to get the token, we have to actually make a call to /API/security, right? So here is the Postman out here. So first thing is, we'll make a call to /API/security. You can see out there. So we have to pass here. Let us see. We have said in the security, it is hard coded for now. Remember, this has to be replaced by the database call, right? So if you see here, Shiv and Shiv. So when I send it, you can see that the token has been created down below, right? Now the next step is, the client has to read this token and pass it to the API in every call. Remember our JWT process. First thing, the client makes a call with the credentials. So this is the first step what I'm talking about. Now at this moment we don't have a user interface, but remember, in Angular or in React or in jQuery or in Vue.js, whatever is your client, JavaScript or C++, whatever client you have, they have to make a HTTP call. They have to go ahead and pass this kind of a value, right? And then they will receive this token, and then they don't have to pass the username and password again and again, right? They have to just take this token and pass it to the server, right? So this is the first part. Now the second question which the interviewer can ask you is that, so where is the token checked? So when the token is passed, right, where is it checked, right? So let us talk about it. So the token is checked in the middleware. So you can see here, we are saying here services.add authentication, and we are saying that this is a JWT bearer authentication scheme. And remember, we need to have the same secret key. Now again, I have hard coded it. So when the request comes in, this middleware fires. Remember, middleware in ASP.NET Core, in ASP.NET MVC, middleware is nothing but it is a logic which executes before your request hits the controller. So this we have covered in part 1, right? So please go ahead and revisit part 1. So here you can see the same secret key is used which was used to create the token. This is very important. So whatever, to create the token, you have used the secret key. The same secret key you should use while checking the token. So this is the second part of the question. Second type of question which can come in. And the third one is, what is the use of authorized attribute? So now this goes and checks the token, isn't it? The last part is, whichever controllers you want, right, to protect, you will go and you will decorate the authorized attribute. If you don't use the authorized attribute, then this controller will not be checked for JWT. Okay, so you have to go and decorate this part. So if you see now, so if we run this, let me stop debugging. I've changed something, I guess. So let me again run this. So if you see this now, so this is the first call will be made to the API security. He gives out the token. Now the second call will make it to the values controller. So you can see this is a values controller. So let me try to make a get call to it. Now if I'm making a get call, so here is a second request of Postman. If I'm making a get call without the token, or if I'm making a get call now, right, let us say if I'm trying to make a get call now, you can see it is showing me 401 unauthorized. It is showing me 401 unauthorized, right? So that 401 unauthorized is coming from where? It is coming from, remember, from here, right? Now if we pass the proper token, so if we go here and we copy this token from here, right? So if you copy this token from here and if we pass the token to it, so to pass the token as a JWT, what you need to do is that in the headers, remember, you have to pass the token in the authorization header. So you can see I've selected bearer token, right? And I'll be passing the values out here. Okay, I'll just send. Now you can see, I can see the value. If I make any mistake in the token, for example, let us say I delete this Y from here, and if I make any mistake in the token, it will again show me 401 unauthorized, right? So trying to answer, first these three questions. I think if you are able to answer these three questions isolatedly in an isolated manner, then you will be able to answer the fourth question, because the fourth question is a summary of all the three questions, right? So how do you create the JWT token? This is how you create the JWT token. You actually, first thing, you go ahead and you install this NuGet package, authentication JWT bearer. You select your algorithm, you add your claims collection, and then you use the secret key and you send the JWT token, right? Where is the JWT token checked? It is checked in the middleware. So in this middleware, whenever a call is made, right? So in this middleware, it will go and it will check the token. So remember this add JWT bearer, this thing will fire every time. For example, look at it. I put a debug point out here. If I'm firing this from here, look at it. If I'm firing this from here, right? Right, this time the token means this code should get executed now and then, at least to my best knowledge. How do I put a debug point here? Very difficult to, but this code will be firing now and then. At this moment I was not able to put a debug point. It did not execute, but the point is that this code gets executed internally in every request, right? So the token is checked, by the middleware, which is added in the services.add authentication. This is where the token is checked. And what is the use of authorized attribute? The authorized attribute, helps us to select the controller which has to be authenticated and authorized, right? So if you want that the values controller should be checked for JWT, decorate it. For example, you can see the security controller I have not selected for JWT, so it will not be having the authorized attribute, right? And definitely for security controller we cannot have the authorized attribute. But the point is that sometimes you have controllers like home controller, about us, and so on, right? Index pages. Probably for that you don't need an authorized attribute, right? So once you're able to answer these three questions individually, now this is what you can answer in a holistic way. So how did you implement JWT token? Remember, in an interview it is very, 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 very important that you speak crisp and clear. Why did I show you so much demonstration? I showed you so much demonstration so that when you are before the interviewer, you know what exactly you are speaking, right? So how did you implement JWT token? The first thing is you have to create the token, right? So to create the token, you have to import this package, right? You have to go ahead and you have to select the algorithm. Remember that three sections of the JWT token. You have to select the algorithm, you have to create a claims object, and then you will use the secret key, and you will take the you will take the algorithm, you will take the claims object and create the token. Where is the token checked? And the second thing is to check the token. For that we have to go and we have to add in the middleware services.add authentication. And the third point is that yes, we have to go and decorate the authorized attribute on the controllers to make sure that those controllers are protected. So when you are answering holistically, please make sure that these 3 points are coming out, right? And if the interviewer is asking you individually, then accordingly you can tailor your answer, right? One of the questions which the interviewer can ask you is that how is the token sent from the client side? So what is the way, the structure of the token being sent from the client side, right? So for that, let us try to understand it. So for example, here, if you remember, this is our same project, and you can see it is 401, right? Now what I'll do is I'll go and I will generate the token. So I'm going to go and generate the token from the Postman. So this is the token, right? Now in order to pass the token here, right, what you need to do is I'm using this mod header out here, right, to pass the value. So I'll just send that. So first thing, the token is sent through the request header, right? So it is sent in the request header, and it is sent by the name authorization, right? So there is a ready-made header, right? A standard header given by the HTTP protocol, right, which is called as authorization. So we have to say authorization, and then we have to say bearer, B capital, bearer, and then the token, right? So if you send this now, so this mod header, what it does is it will actually send that token now. So I'm going to go and say refresh. You can see now, you see the value, right? So if you go and if you see the value, if you go and see the network tab of it, you will understand how the token is sent. So there it is. So if you go and see the request header, right, that's how the token is sent from the client side. So from the client side, what you really need to do is you need to pass by this format, authorization. So very quickly, authorization, bearer, and then the token name. So I will write it down out here. How is the token passed from the client side? It is passed in the HTTP header, and it is passed in the format authorization colon bearer space and then whatever is your token. You can see here authorization, bearer, space, and then the token value. Now the next, what you call connected question which can come out here is, so how do you write the code in your client side? So for example, if you're using jQuery, if you're using JavaScript, if you're using Angular, React, right? So yes, what you have to do is you have to just go and add that header. For example, you can see this is the fetch API. So here we say header, we say authorization, bearer, space, and the token. So what you will do here, first thing, you will make a post call, pass the username and password, get the token, store it somewhere, and then pass it here again. Look at the jQuery, same, $.ajax, authorization, bearer, space, token. Look at Angular, again the same. You create an HTTP option, but you say authorization, bearer, token, and then you pass the HTTP option in the post call or the get call, right? So, you can get this question in two formats. One is saying that from your code, how did you do it? So the answer is that yes, you created an header and you said authorization, bearer. And the another one is, in general, he can ask you is that how is the token sent? The same answer, authorization, bearer, space, right? You pass the token through the headers, authorization, bearer, and that's why the name is JWT bearer. Why? Because the token is sent through this bearer, right? Bearer means, we say, right, the man who bears the torch of victory, right? So this authorization header here actually bears this token and takes it to the server side. Now there can be advanced questions which can come around JWT token, and let us discuss those questions. And one of the specific scenarios which I have always seen in case of JWT being asked is around the refresh tokens, right? So the scenarios are specifically around long-lived tokens or apps which are long-lived or have to be logged in for a long time, right? For example, let's say you have a mobile apps like Netflix or Uber or Ola. Now in these kind of apps, what happens is, for better user experience, right, you don't want that the user should be logging in again and again. So once he logs in, he will be there logged in for a month, right? So this is one of the scenarios which definitely the interviewer can ask, is that how I can increase the UX experience, user experience in mobile apps to avoid re-login, right? Now, probably what can go in your mind is that, okay, I can do like this, I can create a JWT token whose expiry is for 6 months. Now, if you answer this like this, right, it looks to be a very logical right answer, but from the security aspect, there is a big loophole out here. So what probably you can think about here is, or what probably many people answer is that, okay, from the mobile app, you pass in the user ID and password, and what you do is that you keep the expiry token of 6 months. Now that is a bad idea actually from the security aspect. Why? Because within this 6 months, let us say, if someone gets hold of your token, right, it would be a very, very he can take this token and go on and ride in for 6 months and enjoy the gala ride right into your account, right? So definitely, in order to make it secure, right, we need to think something more we need to think in a different way here, right? And that's where exactly the interviewer is expecting that you should be aware of refresh tokens, right? That's where interviewer can also ask you about what is the difference between access token and refresh token. Also, the question can be tweaked, saying that, okay, what are short-lived tokens and long-lived tokens, right? And so on, right? So let us try to understand this concept of refresh token and how, it can help us, or how it can create a more secure, how it can provide more security when you want to have such kind of long-lived tokens, right? So let us try to understand refresh token, and by understanding refresh token, all these 6 questions, what you see here, will be answered. So the interviewer can ask you questions saying that how you can increase the US experience to avoid re-login. If you answer such kind of things, 6 months and so on, the interviewer won't like it, right? Second, he can also ask you directly saying what is a refresh token, what is a access token, right? Or probably he can ask some other questions around it, like short-lived and long-lived. So let us try to answer all these questions in this coming 10-15 minutes. And the way to start is with refresh tokens. So let us first try to understand what exactly is a refresh token, right? I will just first start with the definition. A refresh token is a separate long-lived token. So it is, don't mix up with JWT token. It's a separate long-lived token. By using this token, we can get a new JWT token by which your client does not get logged off, or it is used mostly to extend the client's login, right? So a refresh token helps you to get a new JWT token. That's what the refresh token is all about. So let us try to understand, because the interviewer can ask you is that, can you explain how refresh tokens work, right? So here it is how it works. So first thing, what happens, like our normal things will happen. First thing, the client will send a user ID and a password to the server. But in case of a refresh token, what happens is he sends in the JWT token. Definitely that is needed. You have to send back a JWT token, right? Plus what you have to send is, you have to send a refresh token. This is a separate token. So please note that your JWT token is separate and your refresh token is separate, right? After that, whenever client wants to access the server, he can just send the JWT token, right? He can get access to the server and he can do the operations, right? So this will keep going on. Now when the token expires, what the client does is, because he wants the extension, he does not want to get logged off. He wants a long-lived token. I've talked about the examples like mobile app, where to increase user experience, you don't want the user to again get the user ID pop-up box again and again, right? So in that case, what the app does is, he actually then takes this refresh token and he sends a refresh token to the server, and then the server sends him back with the reply with a new JWT token, please understand, and a new refresh token. So both of them are completely new, right? So a refresh token is a long-lived token. In other words, it can, like for example, if an access token is alive, for let us say for 1 minute, a refresh token would be alive for 30 minutes, right? So, or much more than that, right? So basically, because the point of refresh token is that to get a new token, right? So a refresh token is a token which is sent to the server to get a new JWT token, so that the client does not get logged off again and again. You have a better user experience. Now there can be a tweak of question here as well. The interviewer can ask you saying that, okay, what is the difference between an access token, right, and a refresh token, right? So access token is nothing but the JWT token. So your normal JWT token is an access token, and your refresh token is a refresh token. So a normal access token is used to access the resources of the server, and the refresh token helps you to get a new JWT token so that the client is not logged off. So here is a sample code which I am giving out here. Now remember that I always believe that if you want to explain something, then you should actually run that thing once. You have to look at the code once, right? Interview preparation does not mean that you can cheat around, right? Isn't it? And remember that the person who is interviewing you is a senior person. So he can just catch you like this if you don't know how exactly the thing works, right? So here's a sample example out here. Now please note that I have hard coded security keys and everything, because this is only a sample code for understanding. So don't try to find best practices in this. It won't work out, right? But it pretty much demonstrates the understanding of refresh tokens, right? So here it is. This is a Postman out here. Now this is the URL, where first the client will send in the user ID and password. So you can see this is the user ID, this is the password. So he sends it, and what happens is he gets a JWT token plus a refresh token, right? So this is the access token, the token value, right? And the other one is a refresh token. Now by using this, he can now go ahead and start accessing the resources. So you can go here and you can start accessing the resources, right? Now remember that this JWT token or this access token has an expiry. So I've set an expiry of almost 30 seconds. So once the token expires, so you can see here I'm trying to hit the send again and again. It is showing 200 OK, and now you can see it is showing 401 exception. So that means the token has expired. Now what he will do is he will now go and take that refresh token. So this refresh token he will take, right? He will actually take all of them, right? He will take everything, and he will go and say, oh, like I want to now request for a new JWT token, right? Right. So what he will do is he has to send both of them. He has to send the refresh token as well as the token value. So he sends it, and then he gets back a new refresh token as well as a new JWT token, and the client does not have to log off. He can further continue with this new token. And so there it is. If I now go and do a send OK, it is showing 200 OK. Again, this token, if it expires, then what you do again, you take up this refresh token and value and again apply for a new token, right? So must be what you can do is you can go and you can try to look at the source code, right? Try to understand it. So you can see this is the code of refresh token. I'm sending here the token values, both the refresh token and the access token. And then I'm first trying to check, if the refresh token is equal to the current token, right? And I generate a JWT token again, I generate a refresh token again, and I send it to the client, and so on. So this is how a refresh token works. A refresh token helps you to create a new JWT token for better UX experience. One more question which comes around refresh token versus access token is that whose lifetime is bigger, right? So whose expiry time is bigger? So definitely the access token should have a very, very less expiry time, right? So remember, when you are giving an expiry time in case of an access token, you give it here expires, right? So you can see here this expiry time for the access token, I've given 30 seconds, but for the refresh token, I've given 7 days. Why? Because, we would need it again and again to create new access tokens, right? So this is again one of the question can pop up. The second thing is, another one more question which can come up here is that what do you mean by revocation of a refresh token, right? So many times what happens is, let us say you find that there is something abnormal. For example, let us say that you have an access token and the access token is valid and someone is actually trying to refresh the token. So that means that this is abnormal behavior, right? So what you would like to do is that you would like to go ahead and just invalidate, the refresh token, create a new refresh token, add, whatever days you want, right? And just invalidate the refresh token as well as the access token, right? So revocation of token means that you will be revocation of refresh token means that you will actually expire the refresh token, you will create a new one, and you will also create a new access token. If you remember, in one of the previous question, I had talked about principal and identities. So identity is nothing but it is the actual user, right? And principal attaches context to it. So principal says that this identity will run in JWT token authentication, this identity will run under such kind of privilege, right? So principal is more attached to a context. So what happens now is that, let us say if you want to go and refresh a token, then one of the things you would like to check is that, in that access token, from that access token, you would like to extract the principal, the context, and check that if the principal is right or not, because it is very much possible that this access token is changed by someone, right? So before refreshing, you would like to just make sure that the access token is proper, right? So you can see here, in order to go and extract the principal from the access token, what you need to do is you need to go and use the token handler. So you need to actually go and use the security handler out here, the JWT security token handler, and in this you will give the token, right? And what it will give you as an output is it will give you as an output is the security token, right? So if you see out here, it will extract the security token, and it will extract the security token, and also this output of this validate token is nothing but a principal. So you can see there is a principal. Now in this principal, as we said, it has context. So you can see there are certain claims out here in this principal, right, which I have attached, and also you can see the identity out here. So we can also get the identity, the name, right? So, and we can use that identity, to do things further. So how to extract a principal, right? You need to go ahead and call token handler dot validate, and this token handler is nothing but the JWT security token handler. Passing the token, and he will give out the principal, and once you have the principal, you will know what are the claims, you will know who the user is. You don't have to make a trip to the database, and you can do a lot of checks from the token data itself. This is one of the most frequently asked questions when it comes to JWT token, right? And specifically if you're a senior, right, then this question would surely come up. Now there is no one right answer for this, because it depends. Your application is long lived, your application is short lived, what kind of security you are looking at. So depending on many situations, you will need to make a choice where to store the token, right? So I will try to answer this question from my perspective, but remember that my perspective can be so my perspective here can be accepted by many people, and my perspective here probably many of the interviewers won't like it, right? So please, you can listen to me, but at the end of the day, please do a Google. Please try to check out what is the best answer, what you feel, right? But when you say that you want to store the JWT token on the client side, I feel that these are the six things which the developers use, right? So cookie, in-memory, local storage, session storage, index DB, and headers, right? Now, so let me start. If I am given a choice, right, that where will I store it, I would first choose in-memory. Why in-memory? Because in-memory is the most secured way of storing anything. So in-memory means inside a variable. So for example, if you have a JavaScript at the client side, then you will create a JavaScript variable and you will store the token, and as soon as the application closes, that token has gone, right? So in-memory is my personal choice, and I feel it is quite secured. It is not prone to XSS attacks. It is not prone to a lot of things, right? But if someone says, no, but my application is long lived, like a mobile app, or must be, I don't want the user to keep logging in again and again. So that means that you need now a persistent storage. You need to store that token into the client side. Then my second choice would be the cookie, right? So in the cookie, what I can do is I can go and store the token, right? And must be we can make this cookie HTTP only. So just to make it secure, you can make it HTTP only. Why HTTP only? Because if you make it HTTP only, right, then what happens is this cookie cannot be accessed by JavaScript. So in other words, if let us say somebody goes and injects a JavaScript into your web application, right, into your web page or into your application, right, he can go and he can write a code like this, document.cookie, and he can access it and he can send the cookie somewhere else, and that would lead to exposing your JWT token, right? But if you make it HTTP only, then that is a difficult thing, right? So must be the other choice. If I want to make, I will use a cookie and I will make it HTTP only. Now I do understand that many developers actually also say that we can use local storage, we can use session storage, we can use index DB, but frankly, these things out here are quite insecure storages, right? They are meant for different purpose, right? So if you want to go ahead and if you want to talk with the interviewer, you can, but my personal choice is I won't use this because it is very much prone to XSS attacks. XSS attacks means wherein the attacker actually injects JavaScript inside your web page or injects JavaScript, somehow into your application, and that JavaScript can execute and it can read this local storages and IndexedDB, right? So frankly, I would avoid storing over here. I do know that many developers answer this, but that is my personal choice, right? If you want to have a persistent storage, then cookie is a better one because it has this safety lock of HTTP only. Another one which developers use is, they don't store it anywhere. They pass it, they store it in the headers. That means inside the URLs or inside the headers, right? If I want to do this, then this choice is also better, right? So again, this one you can speak in the interview that you are actually storing it in the headers. But if this is your choice, then this is also a better choice than this, right? So just trying to answer holistically, where would you store, if I am supposed to answer, personally, if I am supposed to answer that, where would you store your token? My first preference is in memory, right? Because in memory inside a variable, because it is not prone to access attacks, it is quite safe, right? And the second one is I will use a cookie, right? I would avoid local storage, session storage, or IndexedDB just because it is prone to access attacks, right? Headers is also one of the good choices, which a developer can make. But please note that if you're putting something in the headers, right, then you have to write server side code also to read this header. So again, you have to do extra work out here. So rather than that, in memory is a better choice. This question will only be asked to seniors, right? So if you're a senior person, who is asking for higher end salary bracket, then this question would come to you, and the interviewer would love to hear the answer. And if you're able to give the answer, then believe me that you are standing out from the crowd, right? So first thing, let us try to segregate the apples and the oranges, right? So OpenID, OAuth, and OpenID Connect are protocols. So they are protocols, first thing. While JWT token is just a token structure, with that three things, right? It is used to exchange authentication and authorization information between client and server. So first thing, these three are protocols, while the JWT token is just a token structure. So that's the first thing, right? So that separates the sheep and the lions, right? Now let us start with each one of these three, right? Now before we start, I want to set a stage out here, right? 2-3 points I want to clarify. Point number one, whenever you are trying to understand these three concepts, you need to understand that there are three participants in this, right? So first one is a client, right? This client out here who wants to go and access the resource. So this resource would be sitting in some resource server, some secured server out there, right? So there is a client who wants to get access to a resource, right? Second one, the third party out here which is involved is the authentication server. This authentication server, can be like something like LinkedIn, something like Facebook, right? Or something like Twitter, right? Or so some kind of a social website it can be, right? Or it can be more sophisticated like Active Directory and LDAP as well, right? So it is some kind of an authentication server out here who has the users, who has the identities, who has the roles, right? And so on. And there is a consent, there is a trust, which is established between the resource server and the authentication server. So in other words, the resource server says that whenever I get a user out here, whenever I get a token out here, the first thing is I'm going to go and ask you, right? Because you know it very well that these users are existing in the system or not, right? So this resource group blindly trusts on this authentication server or the authorization server, for security information, right? To confirm security things, right? So you can see here I have given three diagrams out here, OpenID, OAuth, and OpenID Connect. And in all of these three participants are present. And in all of these three, definitely there is a consent, between the authorization server, also you can say authentication server, and the resource server. So let's first start with the easiest one, OpenID. So you have a client. Now remember, when I say a client, it can be an application or it can be an end user out here, right, who wants to access the resource. So what happens is the client first sends the authentication or the credentials, to the authentication server. The authentication server, sends him a token you can think about, right? And then he goes and he gives this token to the resource server, and the resource server gives him the output or the access, right? Now here, this token which is sent out here, in this token, this authorization server only says that who the user is. He does not talk about what roles that user has, right? So let's say you have a Facebook account out there or a LinkedIn account, so you just want to validate the user. You want to just check out that this user is existing in this earth somewhere, right? So basically you'll tell him, okay, log in into your Google and you get access to here, right? Now you are not interested that is he a rich person, is he an admin, is he some kind of a programmer or a singer, right? You're not worried about what kind of role he is having in that authentication server. You just want to identify who the user is. That means that your resource server out here is only interested in authentication, who the user is. So when this token is sent out here, right, when this information is sent out here, this resource server out here has no idea that what roles this user has. He only knows that who the user is. So from this token he can only know that, okay, this is shiv_koirala@yahoo.com. Well, that is my email, right? So nothing more than that, right? And definitely whenever he gets this token out here, he goes and he takes consultation from the authentication server that he is a right user or not, right? So first thing, OpenID just talks about who the user is. OpenID talks about just authentication. That's it. Now let's talk about the second thing, OAuth. Now you can easily guess it that OAuth, this auth means authorization, right? So here what happens is the client again sends the credentials to the authentication server, right, or authorization server, and he again gives back some kind of a token. Now this token has no who, he only has what roles the user has. So when this client sends a token to this server out here, there is no way that this server can know from this token who the user is. He can only know that what rights or what roles that user has, right? That's it. So here it is more about what. That means here it is more about authorization. One of the things which you will ask is that, okay, where should we use what, right? Now in this scenario it will normally be an end user. Please understand, normally there will be a human involved out here. Normally, I'm just saying, not necessary that sometimes it can be an application also, but this scenario is mostly a user. You know why? Because this resource server is very interested to identify that user who. So that's why mostly this will be a user who wants to do shopping. So you want to just first check that before he does shopping on your website, you want to just make sure that he has a LinkedIn profile or he has a Facebook profile or he has a Twitter profile, so that you are not giving any, you are not allowing, someone who is completely anonymous to come to your website, right? In this case, mostly it is applications. So for example, you have an application running out there and you want to just make sure that the application just has certain rights. Now, because there is no human involved out here, so there is no point in trying to know that who the user is. So here the who is not important, but the what is more important, what roles he has. So must be, for example, let us say you have a application which does backup, right? So a backup application can only do backup. You don't want that the application should come and create databases, or the application should come and drop databases. You only want him to take a backup. So what you can do is, this authorization server will have a role here saying backup, and when he comes here he says, okay, this application only has rights to do backup, right? So from here the resource server is not interested to identify the application as such. He is interested to identify that this application, what task he is trying to do, and does that application have the rights to do that task, right? So this is more about authorization, this is more about authentication. Now let us talk about the third one, OpenID Connect. OpenID Connect is a culmination of both of them. So especially for this end user kind of scenario, you would need that you send credentials and you want both. Now you want the authentication also and you want the authorization also, right? So you want the user also and the roles also, right? So in that case you will use OpenID Connect. So in this case, the resource server knows not only who the user is, but he also knows what the user is. So if you see the last example we have just done, in that claims and all, right, is nothing but the roles, and Also from the token you can identify the user as well, right? So this is mostly the scenario which is for corporates, right? Especially if you have a corporate website, and or if you have some serious website out there, where you just want to make sure that the user who is coming to your website, you want to know everything about him. You want to know who the user is, you want to know what that user can do, and so on, right? Remember that I'm saying user again and again. It can be an application as well, huh? It's not necessary that and well, if you ask me, right, most of the developers out there, will end up with OpenID Connect, frankly, if you ask me. So I know that academically we can discuss about OpenID, we can discuss about OAuth in interviews, right? But when it comes to application development, I feel that OpenID Connect looks to be more practical, or looks to be, you will end up with OpenID Connect, right? Great. So let us try to summarize. Okay, before we move ahead, now the JWT token is used only to pass information, to pass security information. So JWT token comes here. It is just a structure, right? So remember that JWT token is a token, while these three are protocols, right? So summarizing, we can just try to summarize here. OpenID is mostly used for authentication. OAuth is mostly used for authorization, and OpenID Connect has both of them. It has the OAuth plus it has the OpenID, right? And JWT token is just a structure to pass information, security information between the client and the server. One of the questions, which is asked, when you talk about ASP.NET security is, or no interview would complete without asking about identity server, right? Now, I would like to first say that it is beyond scope of this interview question video to cover identity server, but let me try to cover some important questions out here, right? So what exactly is identity server? Identity server is nothing but it is a free open source OpenID Connect framework, right? So remember, we talked about that there is a client, there is an authentication server, and there is a resource server. Now this authentication server, can be a Twitter, it can be LinkedIn, it can be Facebook, right? Also it can be something like Active Directory. But now let us say you say, no, can I have my own identity server? Can I have my own things, then, or if you want a free one, right? Remember, identity server 4 is no more free at this moment. But let us say if you say, no, like I want to install a server in my premise, and I want to do this OpenID Connect, OAuth, and OpenID, and so on, then the answer is identity server. So it's a free open source thing, open source software, I'll say rather. You can install it on your server, and you can easily implement this OpenID and OAuth, which we discussed previously, right? And remember that it is certified by the OpenID Foundation, so definitely it should be following all the protocols, right? So that's what is identity server all about. Also connecting to this, one of the answers, you can give for is for single sign-on. One of the question comes around single sign-on. Single sign-on means that, okay, is it possible I can have 2-3 website out here, website 1, website 2, and how do I log in into a server and then log in only once, right? So I come to here to this website, I log in once, and then I should be able to go to this website. So you want to create a kind of a group of websites, which belong to a common login, which belong to a common authentication. Then again, the answer is to have a centralized identity server or a centralized authentication server, which is again possible by this. So in case if you get a question saying that how to implement single sign-on, well, you should have a separate authentication and authorization server. So when the user goes to one of these websites, right, the group of websites, right, it will automatically redirect to authentication server. Authentication server will validate it, and then the user can log in into any one of these websites, right? And there is one question which comes here. I'm just trying to wrap up this lesson, is around scopes. There is something called as scopes, which is talked in identity server, and in interviews it is discussed also a lot, right? So identity server, the scope is nothing but it is a role, right? It is an authorization role. So when you say in an identity server a scope, it means that, okay, what does he want to do with the with the resource server? Does he want to do a read? Does he want to do a write, and so on? So in identity server, you can go and you can define a scope, and for that scope you will get the appropriate token. You can then take that token and go to the resource server. So a scope, in case if the interviewer asks you about scope, a scope is a role, right? But very frankly, guys, it is beyond the scope of this video. It's already been a more than a 1 hour video, right, to cover about identity server, right? So in case if your job profile is saying that they're looking for identity server, then definitely your fundamentals about OpenID, OpenID Connect, OAuth should be very clear. And I would really suggest that install this identity server. Try to create a small project where you do the authentication and authorization so that you can stand properly in the interview, right? But at this moment we are just talking here is the what part of it. So that brings us to the end of this 1 hour of session. I'm sure that if you go through all of this question, you should be pretty much protected in ASP.NET interviews around security. Now what I have also done is with this also I have written a document. So sometimes what happens is, one is that you have to see the video, and another one is that, let us say you want to go and revise it, right? So all the questions of this ASP.NET security, I put it down as a question and answer format. So whatever I have spoken here, I have tried to put small one-liners out here which you can read and you can revise at the end of the day. Also in this we also have a source code. So while I was explaining the answers, if you remember in the videos, I also have a source code. So must be you can go and you can see the source code as well, which will give you more confidence when you are giving the interview. So hope that you have enjoyed this session. Happy learning, happy job hunting. I hope everybody gets a job, everybody is happy learning, happy job hunting. Thank you.